Yes, we are EV owners, but should you be one too? That's the question that we're going to answer in this video, as well as like some things to look for if you are in the EV market.
So let's go.
Hi, I'm Patrick.
And I'm Liv.
And this is the Mach-E vlog.
And we are here in our Mach-E. We're taking a trip and we're going to go on a trip with you, chat with you while we're on this drive. We have a Mach-E, we have an Equinox at home. We're all in on EVs, but you may not be there yet. So this video is for you if you're thinking about an EV, if you're not sure, what things that you should be aware of and should consider if you're thinking about an EV and whether it's right for you. This video is sponsored by EV Vita, creators of mods and accessories for all EVs and exclusive resellers of best EV mod accessories with direct customer support.
With EV Vita, it doesn't just end when you get their products. They have lots of tutorials. They're very quick to answer questions. We have their products in our Mach-E and our Equinox, and we're really proud to have them as a sponsor. So to get things started, we'll work our way on like the easy cases of like if you should buy an EV. And really it's like if you don't do road trips and you mostly drive around town and you can charge at home, usually meaning you own your own home or whatever situation you have, I think that's like the easiest one. I think an EV is probably a great option for you, and there's no reason why you shouldn't get an EV.
Absolutely. And of course the caveats being if you have access to charging at work, if you don't own your own home or if you're in a multi-family dwelling, but you have access to charging there, if you have access to charging in the place where you sleep for 8 hours, hopefully, if you're lucky, that's a big deal. And that makes it so that EVs are kind of a no-brainer, honestly.
Exactly.
Basically, yeah.
And we've had people ask us and go, yeah, but I live in a cold weather climate. Now, there may be some situations like if you're driving 80 miles each way to work, and you live in a cold climate, you may have range issues. But if you're like a lot of people and you don't drive anywhere close to your range, cold weather is not going to make a difference for your purchase decision. And Ford just released some numbers. They say the average Mach-E owner drives 66 miles a day, which is never ever going to be a problem in the cold weather. And there's actually some advantages that a lot of times don't really get discussed. People are like, oh no, EVs are a disadvantage in cold weather. Well, the advantage in cold weather for an EV is you can set like a departure time. So if you leave your house every morning at 7 a.m. to go to work or school or wherever, you can just have the car ready for you at 7 a.m. all nice and warm and toasty, even if it's in your garage, which if you have a gas car, you can't really start your car in the garage because that's dangerous. You can't start it if it's on the street. Some places that's illegal, and it's always at a risk for being stolen. So it's actually really nice to have that remote start feature, basically. So there's
And additionally, if your vehicle is plugged in, you're not wasting any energy to do that.
Well,
so,
you're not wasting your range.
yeah, you're not wasting the energy that's in your vehicle. You're using the energy from the grid.
So if you're just driving within your region, less than 150 miles a day, you know, most of these EVs have a range of well over that. And there are some, you know, like that you do have to look out for that are really low range. But most EVs, it's just like a no-brainer. So that's the easy case. We'll move into some of the more difficult ones. And that's like, what if you do that all the time, but you do go on road trips? And we are sort of, I think, the prime examples of like, we take the occasional road trip. We've done 2,400 mile road trips and stuff.
And I would like everyone to leave their typical number of road trips in the comments. Just tell us the number, how many road trips you normally take.
And how do you define, like, what is a road trip? And like, how far is it?
I feel like it's an overnight. A day trip is a day. A road trip has an overnight, right?
Yeah, and
so road trip.
So when people are talking about EVs and road trips, like, I think you also have to keep in mind what type of road trips you take. So our last road trip was to Las Vegas, which is about 300 miles, which means we had one charging stop. And in that situation, it's like we stopped, we got something to eat, and then we kept going. So in if you look at that compared to a gas car, it's probably like to stop and eat and get gas, take about 45 minutes. And with the EV, it takes the same amount of time. So really, in that type of road trip, I don't think there's really any difference. It almost, again, a no-brainer. Now, if you're the type that's like, I don't care, it's 300 miles, I get in the car, I'm going to drive 300 miles, and I'm not going to get out of the car until I get there, the EV is not for you. If that's a major factor for you, it's not for you. Like I can argue with you and say like, yeah, you probably should stop. You probably need to eat. You probably need to. Somebody actually just responded to us in the comments, and they said that they drive this one stretch of road. It's about 300 miles, and yes, sometimes they want to stop, but sometimes they have kids sleeping, and in those situations, they just want to do 300 miles, no stopping. And I'm like, I'm not going to argue with that. I mean, that's your situation.
But this does come into another concept, which is in those situations, could you rent a vehicle? How often do you road trip? That the benefit of an electric vehicle might be so great that you could rent an ICE vehicle or hybrid or whatever suits you. Like we rented a minivan once because we had my recumbent trike and all that stuff. So could you be in a situation where an EV would benefit you so much and completely not suit you for the way that you like to road trip, but renting something else would be suitable?
And there are some arguments to doing that may be too much of an inconvenience for you, but my parents started doing that because they were like, well, we have our car, but we don't necessarily want to drive it across the country, because they were doing that as they were getting their retirement age. And they just decided, we'll just rent a car. We have like a newer car, it's more comfortable and all of that good stuff. So the argument for like, if you have an EV that is very efficient, doesn't cost you much around town, you don't have to get the big extended battery for that once or twice a year road trip, you can take that savings that you're having from cheaper daily commute expense and not buying a big huge battery to then pay for a car rental. So that's always an option.
And to be honest, it's something I did in my ICE days as well, because my car was a 98 RAV4. It was not reliable. I've been stranded at the side of the road in it a couple of times. So that is not a car you take on a road trip. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like with my parents, they were like, their car was like getting up there in years, and they're like, we don't want to buy a new car, but it made sense for them. And another situation that might work for you to justify buying an EV is like my brother, he has a Mach-E, but his wife has, I think, a Cadillac Escalade or some SUV or whatever, and he's very much of like, I don't want me or my family to have to deal with the EV charging, so he drives the EV around town, but then they'll take the gas car on road trips. Now, me personally, I'm like, I just want to stick with the EV, but that's always another option for you, is like the EV is in your metropolitan area or rural area, maybe, and then you have a gas car for the road trips. True 100% EV enthusiasts are going to be like, no, don't do that, but you get to do your purchases the way you want, and if it makes sense, don't just shut out an EV because it doesn't make sense 100% of the time. You can have those exceptions and work it out that way, and it's doing something. It's better than nothing.
Absolutely. So then another consideration that might be for you is to be aware of the infrastructure around you. So if you are getting an EV, if you'd like to get an EV, if you may not have access to charging at home, or if you're going to be relying somewhat on public charging, or if you'd like to road trip your EV, do your research. We have a bunch of videos on it. We'll link them up in the cards. Check out PlugShare, check out a better route planner, check out the area around you, and don't just assume. So make sure that where you live and where you frequent is well suited to the lifestyle that you're thinking of having with an EV. Because for us, having a single family dwelling, able to have a 240 volt in the garage, no problem, no lifestyle change, only benefits. But if your area is not well suited to an EV and you commit to this lifestyle, we just want you to be aware. Because what Patrick mentioned earlier, where you don't want to get an EV and not be prepared, and then 6 months later you hate it. He says that because we've seen people do it, we hear about people doing that, and that rolls right into another thing. We've heard about people getting a CHAdeMO vehicle and not being aware of the requirements of that.
A Nissan Leaf.
A Nissan Leaf, yeah. We'll just say a Nissan Leaf. So we know someone who got a Leaf because they're so well priced, or were at the time at least, but they were not aware that this would limit their public charging options. And if you don't know, there are limited stalls for CHAdeMO, very much so. So this person relies on public charging and is now having to invest in the CCS to CHAdeMO adapter, or is it that vice versa? Doesn't matter. But like, these are realistic considerations to have that will completely alter your experience with an EV. And we want you guys to have the best experience that's the best customized for you.
Oh, there's a cop. So I'm like, is he
Are we getting pulled over? Who are they pulling over?
I think them. So
okay. Whew.
Okay, it wasn't us.
It wasn't us. Like, what would we have been doing? You were blue cruising.
Yeah, I was blue cruising, wasn't really paying attention to what the cop was doing, but I was watching the road, keeping my eyes focused, going slower than the pace of traffic, so I didn't think it was me, but anyways.
I'm going to take that opportunity to jump right into something. We can flip back to the CHAdeMO if you want, but obviously, EVs have some of the newest technology, some of the coolest ADAS. It's just really cool stuff. But that may not be suited to you. So me, I don't care about Blue Cruise. I don't care about Super Cruise or any of that. Because I don't typically do the long driving on the highway. So if we're looking at me as someone who uses an EV around town and I'm more concerned about how it drives, how it handles, than how the ADAS handles it cooperatively with me, that's something to be aware of too. And of course, some of this applies to just new cars in general, but EVs at this time in general are kind of the newest, right?
Yeah, they do generally have a lot of tech forward stuff, but you can get EVs like Kia Niro and things like that aren't as, they're basically just like their gas counterparts. So if you don't want all the whiz bang stuff, you don't have to do that. And you know, we can sort of jump into a little bit of like what to look for in an EV, but I did want to hit on one thing that we're not going to get in too in depth, and that's like EV trucks. And if you're just driving an EV truck, all the stuff that we've already said applies. If you're going to be towing, whether it's an EV truck or some other EV that tows, might want to find somebody else and really think about it. We know people that have gone coast to coast pulling 10,000 pound trailers in their EV trucks, F-150 Lightnings, by the way, 2 different people actually, and they have done it. They say it's no big deal, but we're not experts on towing with a gas truck, let alone an EV truck. So we don't want to get involved in that, but it is a huge, big consideration that you should really do a lot of research. And going back to something before we switch gears, not only looking at the area around you for charging, but looking at the routes that you're going. So if you look at like a better route planner, like we're in San Diego, I could do routes in a better route planner, and it lets you pick which car you may be considering and doing a route and going like, oh, okay, that's where it's saying charging will be. And more than likely you're gonna see that it's probably very doable, but do your research and make sure that it's acceptable to you, and it will estimate your travel time, including charging stops, so you can sort of get an idea. Like when we were lived in Denver and we're doing road trips to Santa Fe, I knew about how long it took us in our gas car, and then I planned it out before we got our EV. It was like, oh, okay, it's saying it'd be about 30-40 minutes longer by driving the EV. So it was sort of like, that's doable. It helped allay some of my fears. But we can sort of transition.
I have actually something to piggyback on that. Another thing is, I love your call to know your routes if there's a trip that you often do. And something that we've actually heard from a couple people is they drive around the city a lot, but then once or twice a year they go visit family somewhere more rural, and they have more limited charging options. So that's okay, and that's potentially going to be okay if you can ask your family or help your family to invest in a charger on their property. So if you are visiting them and they have a level 2, that can really, really help you if you're going to drive the family and spend the weekend there or whatever. But that's a really good thing to look into before you do this transition, because they may not be able to have that installed. Their system, they just may not be able to do that. And if you are relying on that, you really want to make sure that that's possible. But if it is possible, great. That is a great option. And from some of the people that we've talked to, that opens up a full possibility to go somewhere a bit more rural and then take advantage of their now family charging. Now we can pivot.
Yeah, there's so much that we could talk about. We're trying to condense this, but we also a lot of people ask us what to look for when they are buying an EV. And I think one of the important things to remember, first of all, is we'll get to range and all of that, but it's just like buying any car. Find something that you like, and it includes, paint color, styling, whatever. Find something that suits you, suits the size that you want, and all of that. And that's could be your starting point, because it's still a car, and it's still something you're going to live with for years, and it's still an expensive expression of your own self. So, that's why we have, I believe, 250 different models and versions of cars sold in the United States, because we all have these slight differences. So don't forget that it is a car. Now, when it comes to the EV side of things, there are different things you want to consider, but there's a lot of things that you can ignore depending on your use case. And that goes back to if you're going to never take it on a road trip, you might not care at all about real range or charging speeds and all that other stuff. So a lot of EV people, including ourselves, when we review EVs, we focus a lot on range, charging speed. Let's do a charging test. And that is important to know, and it is an important consideration, especially for somebody that's taking a lot of road trips. But we were trying to convince Liv's mom to buy an EV. She didn't. She bought a plug-in hybrid. But we were, for her case, she doesn't drive on the highway. She doesn't drive long distance. So our argument was basically absolutely any EV out there would be fine for her.
Yeah, and that's another thing. We talk about this sometimes with phones, because we'll get excited to get a new phone, and then we get it, and it's just another rectangle. So our phones are at the point that they're really, really good, and honestly, our cars are too. So I don't think that there's any EV that's really a dumpster fire or anything like that. There are EVs that don't get as much press attention. There are EVs that don't look that good or don't charge as well as others or have as good range or as much power. But they're all, honestly, kind of better than ICE vehicles in my opinion, as in instant torque, good enough amount of range. There's a lot that's really good about them. So don't feel like you have to go for the popular opinion or the fanciest car or the one that you see advertised the most. Whatever it is, if you want that Subaru Solterra, it's totally fine and great. And if you want the VinFast, it's fine too.
Exactly. And when you are, if you are saying I do want to be able to take my car on road trips, that's when you start to, that's when you need to start looking and considering EV range as well as charging speeds. And all the manufacturers are going to sort of give you the same EV range info on a similar sort of basis, because it's controlled by the EPA, even though there's ways to finagle that. But they also will mention charging speeds. And here's the main thing for if you're an EV newbie to think about with the EV range, is they're sort of doing the combined city highway range, but around the city you don't really care. You're going to be driving the car and plugging in at night, hopefully. Where it really matters is on the highway. And that's where EVs, if it says it gets 300 miles of range, that's from 100% down to zero. Well, if you do 100% down to zero on the highway, you're probably only going to get like 260, 270, depends on the EV and how efficient it is at speed. And then on top of that, you're probably only going to use the 10 to 80% battery range, especially as a new EV owner. The reason for the 80% at the top end is that EVs generally charge a lot slower after 80% or a bit slower, depending on the car. So you don't necessarily want to, when you're on a road trip, charge all the way up to like 90, 95% or 100% because it takes so much longer to do that last little bit of charging. It's the same thing as when you charge your phone. It charges quick to like 90% and then it slows down. And then you don't want to get down too low because you're new. You'll have EV range anxiety or charger anxiety. So 10% is like a realistic bottom. So like if you start looking at it, our car, it's a performance Mustang Mach-E. It's the GT version. So it's rated for 260 miles of range. I think the longest stretch that we did, and that was going from 100% down to like 5 or 6%, was about 200 miles or so, just over 200 miles. Most of the time we're doing like 180 mile for our long stretches. Most of the time really like 150 miles. So it's like about 50% of the overall range of what the car is rated for. And that is just basically the realistic part of any EV. Some are more optimistic than others when they state their range, but really the whole thing is like if you see something that says 300 miles, think of it as like 200 on the on your road trips, given the higher speeds, reduced range, and you don't use all the battery. So if it has 200 miles of range, you're probably looking at maybe 140 miles at most, maybe 120. So then it starts getting down a little bit. That's a little bit harder to deal with. I would say it's nice to get something that's close to or more than 300 miles if you're going to be doing road trips.
I was just thinking though, because our other EV is an Equinox EV, front wheel drive 2024, so it gets 319 miles of range. We did road trip it to Vegas just to try it. We're not going to road trip it much. We'll be road tripping the Mach-E. It's a Blue Cruise vehicle. Patrick's hands-free. That makes a big difference. But it's really fun having such a long-range vehicle around town. Because I was just thinking, I'm like, I don't even know what charge level it's at. I don't know. Because I drive it around town and it goes forever. It does make a difference.
And it's really nice, just to be able to plug in at home. That's one of the huge advantages, that it's really hard to convey, like how nice it is to never have to go to a gas station. And it's not so much that a gas station is such a oh my God, I got to go to a gas station, which it becomes that way once you get used to not doing it. But it's more of the having to remember to do it or making it a part of your routine.
I think it's the when. So I remember there's nighttime live and morning live. Nighttime live like to get gas because morning live never likes to get gas. But then nighttime live was always stuck getting gas in rush hour traffic. And it always seemed to be snowing in Colorado. Snowing and cold, right? So in rush hour, it's cold. You don't want to be doing that, but I really don't want to do that in the morning because morning live doesn't know what the weather's going to be like. Nighttime live knows what it's like right now. So it was always this bartering, I don't want to. And then, we think that you don't wait at gas stations, but when I had my ICE vehicle and we had the Mach-E, I would go and gas up and then text Patrick while I'm waiting or, things like that. It's just, once you switch to electric, filling up at a gas station is awful and you never want to go back. At least I don't. You have to let us know how you feel.
Exactly. So the next thing, because we talked a bit about range, I think the other thing is charging speed. And it's something that a lot of people that are new to the EV world don't really think about. They just know the range. And if they do know charging speed, they'll look at that peak charging speed that the company manufacturers, and they know well, this one's faster than that one. So I want the faster one. Again, it's sort of like if you're not road tripping often, it's probably not that big of a deal. We've made that road trip to Vegas in 3 different vehicles: a Model Y, the Mach-E, and the Chevy Equinox. They have different ranges, different charging speeds. In the end, it was only a few minutes difference between those. That isn't that big of a deal, but if you're doing it constantly, you may want to consider more about charging speeds. And furthermore, like, I would almost disregard like any of the peak charging speed stuff that the manufacturer's talking about. Maybe look at their 10 to 80% stated charging speeds. But really what you want to do is look at like out of spec studios, out of spec reviews. They review a bunch of cars. Check out their YouTube channel, and they'll do a full charging test for a lot of these cars, and that gives you a realistic look at how long it takes to charge these things. And that's way more information than just the peak charging speed. And a good example is a lot of times people will talk about the Mach-E, which the newer 2024s and 2025s charge like 20% faster than ours. It's a 2022. And but our car charges like 10 to 80% in about 36, 38 minutes, I believe, according to the specs. Anyways, a Model Y, which has a lot higher peak, supposedly up to like 250, I think, or whatever, but it still charges like in 32 minutes. So like 4 minutes difference is not that big of a deal. But Ioniq 5, Ioniq 6, Kia EV6, all the ones from the Korean manufacturers, they can technically, if they, under the right circumstances, can charge in like 18 minutes. A couple of road trips a year, I may not really care. I actually don't care. I mean, I would love to have faster speeds, but it's not that big of a deal. But if I were making those trips multiple times per year, and we're slowing down, so I'm sort of keeping extra close attention, but Blue Cruise is handling it. But if I were doing that trip multiple times per year, or per month or whatever, then I might be more worried about that 18 minutes versus 36 minutes charging time. But again, like if we were going to Vegas and we have like one charging stop, does it really matter if I make that trip like twice a year, both directions, and it's like, a 20-minute difference? It's not that big of a deal. But it is something that you do want to look at and consider, is the overall charging speed. And again, keep in mind with what you're doing with your EV. If you're driving around town, who cares? If you're taking a couple of road trips, you care a little bit more. And if you're road tripping all the time or taking long trips all the time, then you really do want to pay attention to that.
And do you need to know the charging curve of your vehicle? No, you don't. If you want to go simplistic, a lot of the automakers actually just like to say, fully charged in 35 minutes or whatever, right?
10,
like
10 to 80 and 35
10
minutes.
to 80 and 35.
10 to 80.
They won't tell you the charging speed. You can just know that. Just know that sort of blanket chunk amount of time. Then obviously try it out with your vehicle. If you're really curious, rent that vehicle, Turo it, whatever it is beforehand. But no, you don't have to know the charging curve of your EV in order to have one. You don't. And you don't have to know the charging curve of your EV in order to road trip it. If you want to, you can get hella nerdy. Obviously, we've gotten pretty nerdy, but you don't have to. You just have to know what to expect and how to handle it and how to prepare for it. Like I said before, we have some videos on like how to prepare for road trips, stuff like that. But don't feel intimidated or feel like you have to know all of this, or like even keep an eye on the charging curve of your EV. You will have to learn some new things if you're new to EV charging. You can't just plug it in and walk away necessarily. You might need to like wait and make sure everything's okay. But no, you don't need to be tracking the charging curve, any of that.
And I would say, like, you do, about the most that you, well, not the most, but the starting point is like knowing, like, if you're especially looking at used EVs, like a Chevy Bolt tops out at about 50 kilowatt speed. That's relatively slow. Ours, the peak is says 150, but we can get up to like 170, whatever, kilowatts. That's pretty standard. That's what I would say. Like if you're going to be road tripping a bit, that would be like your minimum. And then you have like the Hyundai and Porsche and stuff, and Rivian that can go above 200, above 300 kilowatts charging speed. So just keep that in mind. Again, depends on your use case is how you want to look at that.
Love seeing a Mach-E in front of us. Space white, looks great. Where's a glacier gray? It's so gray today, I can't even tell.
And it's so
Space
small on
white.
the camera now.
Oh.
But anyway, you can see the blinker. But yeah, we were trying to just not ramble too much, but try to give you some direction. If you're looking at buying an EV, what we also want is please drop all your questions in the comments, and we will go through and answer them in the comments, and we may make another follow-up, a more detailed video, maybe a bit more organized, who knows. But we really do want to answer your questions, and we really want to be authentic in how we approach EVs and try to convince people to give them a try. If nothing else, go test drive at least one EV and see what you think about it. It doesn't matter which one, just test drive any of them and see what you think about how it feels. If you can, test drive multiples. And the other thing that I would love to do, and we haven't actually done this, but sort of like test drive some of the cars that have an EV and a gas version and see what you think about each of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of this is born by the fact that you guys and our friends and our family and everyone reach out to us and ask us what EV to get. And we appreciate that so much. Like, how cool is that people would care about our input and want to reach out to us, but we can't answer everyone. And some people might want to know, but they don't have a way to reach out to us. So feel free to contact us. All of our details are in the description of the video. You can contact us in various ways and we'll try to answer. Ask in the comments. Our viewers, you guys are amazing. Many of you are super EV experts yourselves. So please share your knowledge and the wealth of all your information with everyone else in the comments and share your input. So feel free to ask your questions if you have them, share your knowledge if you have them. And so that's very much what we wanted to do was just sort of chat a little bit, because people reach out to us and say, I'm thinking of getting an EV. What should I get? Just tell me what to get. And then we always have to say, like, tell us what your life is like. You know, where do you normally drive? How do you live? Where do you live? Do you have a garage? We have to ask all these questions. So I guess in a way, this is us chatting with you about that. And also this is an opportunity for you to leave that stuff down below. So on that note, shall we head out?
I think so. I could talk for hours on this and let us know. Maybe we'll do a live stream where we can have people actually connect with us live and answer questions. But
yeah,
we know your time is valuable. We know this video has been long, so I think we should go.
Yeah, and do let us know if you want something like this again, because we love chatting with you guys, and there's lots to talk about in EVs. There's so much to talk about. So on that note, thank you so much for joining us for this video in which we chatted about what things you should consider and keep in mind if you are thinking about getting an EV. A huge thank you to our patrons whose names are scrolling across the screen right now. We appreciate you guys so very, very much. Right there. As well as our YouTube members who you know by the lightning bolt next to their names. The more lines they have next to the lightning bolt, the more months they have supported us. Thank you so much. And we know that many of you don't have a Mach-E, you have a different EV, you might have ICE vehicles, you might have hybrids, whatever. So let us know down below what you drive, what you're thinking, all that good stuff. And just remember that whatever you drive, whether it's EV, ICE, hybrid, pony, donkey, what else? A horse and cart. Enjoy the ride.
Bye.
Bye.